Well, I'm Bruce Arnold, and I'm kind of the pseudo head of the guitar department at NYU. And I run the ensemble programs, plus I have private students, and then I run the New York Summer Guitar Intensive, which is a program, 3-week program in the summer where students can come to New York and study for 3 weeks, and you can get college credit for that. I come from South Dakota, and I grew up there playing mostly the blues, and then I started going to school at University of South Dakota, and that was fine. It just didn't work out because I didn't really have a guitar major, so I ended up switching in my third year to Berklee College of Music, where I got a degree in composition, and then I taught at Berklee for 4 years, and then taught in a lot of schools in the New England area, Dartmouth College and New England Conservatory and some other smaller places. Then in about 1986, I moved to New York and started teaching at New York University, Princeton University, and now I also teach at City College and the New School University. And then, I also play, you know, but I'm just kind of concentrating on what I do teaching-wise. I also have studied with some really great, I guess people would call them jazz instructors, Charlie Banakis and Jerry Bergonzi in the Boston area, who are some of the greatest minds, I think, in music as far as improvisation goes. And that's kind of where I have taken the way that I teach is looking more into, I guess you could call it the mathematics of music, where you divide everything up into the possible permutations that you could be doing for some combinations of notes and every way that you could use that as chords, and some, which it goes quite against what most people teach when it comes to jazz. A lot of times it's like, go transcribe this particular jazz player and learn to play his solos in 12 keys, and which I think is important too, but my thrust is towards kind of understanding music at a deeper level and hopefully taking that information and creating a unique voice in music. Because I think one of the problems that happens with people, if they do just transcribe and that's all they do, they tend to lose themselves inside of other players, so they end up sounding like Wes Montgomery or whatever, and they never really develop their own style. So I really try to get students in that direction of getting their own style. I play guitar. I have a band, trio, that plays my original music, which is kind of different than most people's music because it's a combination of basically 12-tone compositions for jazz, trio, or quartet, whatever it may be. And then I play with a bunch of different other groups, a group called Spooky Actions, which does the music of different composers, like we did a CD of Anton Webern's music. And then basically the whole idea of Spooky Actions is you take some classical piece of music, could be anything from early music, Gregorian chant, to Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time, or we did Webern's Five Movements for String Quartet. Anyway, any of those pieces, you just take each movement and you play the head, and then you improvise off from that head using set theory, which is something that I'm into, and that's how my compositions are written, so it's kind of an offshoot of the type of work that I do with my own music. I try to put into improvisation all kinds of different influences. For instance, we've also, Spooky Actions has also recorded American Indian music, where we'll use that as the basis for improvisation. So, it can go basically anywhere from there. But I guess in all of it, I kind of bring in this idea of non-tertial based structures that are either fully related or partially related to 12-tone set theory. And by doing that, you'd be, I'm sure most listeners would say, oh, that must sound really weird. But it actually doesn't sound very weird at all. If you, I think there's a big misunderstanding on what exactly 12-tone music is. 12-tone music can be just as tonal as anything else. It's just how you arrange things. So, most of the time when people hear any of those CDs, they don't they notice that something's different, but they don't know what it is. It's not like it's not like you're listening to Schoenberg where wait a minute, something's very, very different and very, very dissonant. Most of my music isn't really that dissonant. It's pretty sweet sounding, actually. I've written over 50 books on music education, and those can be found at musique.com, which is MUSE-EEK.com. I've also, if you buy these books, I've also created a website that has literally thousands of videos and MP3 files. Basically, for the last about 2.5, 3 years, almost every time a student asked me a question, I videotaped myself answering it. So once you buy one of my books, you go into this website, and you could spend, I don't know, weeks just trying to go through all the information in there, because I found that it's very easy. If somebody buys a book, you can have two people read the same paragraph, and both of them are going to come away with a different thing that it's saying. So, I started noticing that as soon as I started writing books, so I started videotaping myself answering the questions in many different ways so that people, no matter what their background is, could understand, from reading all that, or either seeing the videos, or I should mention that I also take emails from people that buy my books. So, for instance, particularly in ear training, which is something that's very easy for people to misunderstand, if you went to one of my ear training books and looked at the FAQs of all these questions, it would take you a week to read through it. It must be 100 pages long of questions and answers over the last, I don't know, I guess it's 11 years now that people have been sending me emails. So, it's quite a resource of education, and would be a great thing for students that might be displaced by Hurricane Katrina, or people anywhere in the world that are having a problem getting to the right information. And the reason I did that is because I'm from South Dakota, where when I grew up, I didn't have any of that information. And once I found it, I just said to myself, I'm going to do everything I can so that people do not have to go through what I went through, where you're learning bad information, practicing it for 10 years, and then somebody says, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. So then you spend 2 years unlearning what you learned and trying to, it's just crazy that the things that can happen in education. So I'm just, trying my best to not have that happen to other people. Well, the first thing I do when students come in is I play with them, probably a blues or something, just to see where they're at in their playing, their time, and how their comping is, so that, and their soloing, so I can see some of the just basic musicianship things of how they're playing. And then after that, I test their ears. I do a lot with ear training, totally different type of ear training than is taught in 99% of the music schools. Most schools teach interval training. I teach a system that's based on learning all 12 pitches against a key center, which is quite different than interval training, and I have a series of books that I've put out on that. So I test them on that, and then usually I can just tell from their playing what they know and what they don't know. But then what I do is I pick a topic, what I call an improvisational concept. And it might be like scales, for instance, is a common one that I'll start freshmen with, and I'll have a whole list of scales that they need to go through in a certain way that they should learn them, so that they basically start to learn the vocabulary of the instrument and where everything is. But I have many different concepts that I would use. Another one would be approach notes, where I teach them how to use chromatic approaches into other notes, which is kind of the basis of bebop, but of course can be taken much further than that if you learn all the possible ways that you could use approach notes. Or if somebody's already has that in their playing. See, all this stuff that I'm talking about, if they already have it in their playing, I'm probably not going to stress it that much. It's if they don't have it in playing. And 99% of the students that come in don't have their scales all together, and certainly don't have approach notes. So that's a common thing I start with. But for instance, when I get graduate students, A lot of times they've already studied that, so I might start them. Well, many of my students are already interested in what I'm doing with this whole hexatonic system of scales, and that feeds into this 12-tone set theory I was talking about. So I got quite a few students that are studying that with me because it's such a unique sound and opens up a whole new, I guess you could say, a whole new style of music, or certainly a new sound. But that's just one of many. So usually when somebody comes to me, they study one concept, usually for about a year, and then we'll move to another concept. And my overall idea is to just introduce them to all the possibilities that are out there so that they can then pick what they like and then go with that as your kind of main thrust in developing your own style. Well, I think it's necessary to transcribe solos and learn solos by all kinds of different artists. I think one of the problems that happens with some people, like I know people that have transcribed, maybe 50 Charlie Parker solos and taken it through all 12 keys. Well, that's going to take you about 20 years to do. So if that's all you're doing, you can't really expect that you're going to develop your own style if you're only just studying one artist and just totally immersing yourself in them for 20 years, you know what I mean? But I think, I've transcribed 3 or 4 Charlie Parker solos and learned them so I could play them right along with the record, and I've got a lot out of that, but I wouldn't particularly recommend just only doing that. I think the other problem is a lot of people will transcribe this stuff and they just kind of learn it, but they don't understand what they're playing. So that's another problem that people can run into, is just either not understanding or understanding in the wrong way what they're playing, so that they end up developing in kind of an odd way because they didn't have good education, basically. I hardly know of anybody, unless they're, great stars or something, and that aren't also teaching or doing something else, that are playing what I guess we'd call jazz music. It's just, in the United States, it's just, unless you're going to be very commercial about it, and most people, at least that I know, are not commercial. We're just into creating original sounding music, which usually isn't that popular. So, in the United States, it's very hard to find work playing that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a few cities where you can play stuff, but you're not going to make a lot of money. So, a lot of people teach. The first thing I would tell a student is, just get the best education you can so that you know the most stuff. Because if you do have to end up teaching, you want to have good information to give people. And then, other people are like me who will form little record labels, or, write a few books or something. I think that's an excellent way to get a little extra income, and that also comes throughout your life. If you put out a book, it's there year after year after year, and that can make a big difference. For me, basically, I'm running a record label off from the profits I get from the book sales. So it allows you also to start expanding out into doing the things that you want to do. And so I would highly recommend people to, not just think about just playing music, because there's so few people that actually only play music and make any sort of living that isn't just living in an apartment with 6 other guys or something. Once you get married or something, you got to have a very good income, and plus a lot of people that are playing a lot end up not wanting to play because of whatever. They have a child, they don't want to be on the road 365 days a year. That's really bad on the children. So being able to teach also gives you the ability to be home more. Well, if you're parents, don't make your kid work. That's one of the main mistakes I see in people, is they say, okay, well, I had this with my mother. I'd come home, I'd practice all day, she'd come home. What, you didn't do anything all day? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just practiced for 5 hours. But, on the other side of that, some students just sit around and jam all day. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, getting books like some of the books I've written, or whatever books you want to use, and really working through them. I mean, I'm talking about really working. And of course you can't do that if you're doing a summer job, or you go to high school and you got a job from 5 to 9 every night. Well, you're just not going to get anything done. So that's what I would advise for them. And honestly, I would advise students to go to that website, MUSE-EEK, and just look at some of these books so that they can see a very different approach to music education. I don't care if they buy the books, if they just read the FAQs about the books, they're going to learn a lot just about a different way of looking at things that's out of the mainstream, and what I think is a much better way in many categories to approach music education. Well, I think one of the saddest things in the United States is the lack or the getting rid of music education in the public schools. I think it first of all makes people not even know about other music, so that, some people, like the parents may say, why are you listening to that crap? Well, if they don't have music education in the school, how are they going to know that Bach exists, or Messiaen, or John Coltrane, or you know what I mean? You got to be exposed to that to know what's going on there. With all music, there's so much involved in structure and mathematics, and so many of the other types of disciplines that I think if people get immersed in music, that will help them understand how different, well, let's just take mathematics, how mathematics can be applied to making sound and making beautiful music. You know what I mean? So that makes you, a lot of people like to hire musicians because they're very creative, and they can see a different way of combining things. And I think that's one of the things you get from music is to become creative. And of course, if you're creative, that's going to help in whatever field you go into, to solve problems or to invent something new, or it's just overall, I believe, a better way to live your life, and you're happier too. I think get some people that believe more in teachers, first of all, that realize that you can't pay teachers the bare minimum and expect to get the best teachers. That yes, if it's going to cost you more in taxes, you should pay more taxes so that your kids can be educated. You're supposed to love your kids, so you should pay them the teachers some more money, so you get better teachers, so you get better education, so your kids grow up to be smarter people. What it's going to take to do that, I don't know, but it's something I think every parent should sit around and think about.